I'm hoping that this video can play an important part in exposing the true reality of the corruption that's taking place in Formula One to a much greater audience. And I'm hoping that the people who are subscribed to this channel can play their part by doing what I'm asking you to do as I go through the video. I'm going to take you through now this video here, which is by Resaca Motor. It's a Brazilian F1 YouTube channel. It's had 93,000 views, which is the biggest amount of views I can see relating to the Massa court case. And what's really important is this YouTuber's got over 300,000 subscribers. So he's able to kind of expose things to that Brazilian audience. And so I'm going to take you through this video that he's presenting. I'm going to disprove some of the things that he's saying. I'm not doing this to try to argue with him or put him down. I'm just trying to expose to him the true reality of what is taking place, in the hope that we can all help each other to see what the situation is. So for those of you that are the subscribers to my channel, can you, once I post this, I'm going to put a link to this video. I need you to comment in his video, show support to his channel, please. And if you speak Portuguese and can write in Portuguese, please put a comment to him to direct him to this video so that he gets to see exactly what I'm saying, and hopefully he can present this to his subscribers on his channel. Because also he's got the ability to present the true reality of Abu Dhabi to the 300,000 people that are his subscribers, and I'll give him a brief little overview of that at the end of this one. But firstly, I'm going to take you through this video and show what he's saying, and it's understandable what he's saying, but I'll tell you where he's wrong. So let's just go through it. This is his advert, by the way, but it's not mine. Okay, so what we've got here is it is dubbed, but you're going to hear it in English. So let's just have a listen.
The Felipe Massa trial has begun, and here's a snippet of the FIA's defense document that Racing News shared with us. And look, the initial response is quite interesting, to say the least. Hello, friend of Resaca Motor, welcome to another video. I'm Mateus Put, and this video is a little different from the usual ones on this channel. We're going to talk about Felipe Massa's trial, which aims for a multi-million-dollar compensation, potentially reaching around $80 million, and also recognition as the 2008 world champion, without taking the title away from Lewis Hamilton, something I've said several times on this channel that I'm in favor of. But anyway, without further ado, let's talk about what this FIA response is. So I should put on the screen for you to take a look at the following, according to Racing News, a snippet of the FIA's response here, right? A snippet of the document, not the entire document. One excerpt reads as follows: Mr. Massa's complaint is as convoluted as it is excessively ambitious. The Brazilian...
Before I go any further, how I'm going to explain this is that this court case is a facade. Okay, it is a smokescreen designed to get a ruling to protect the FIA. And I'll as we go through it, I'll explain why. But I will tell you from the start, what we've got a corrupt justice system here in the UK, and our so-called justice system actually serves to protect the interests of the billionaire organizations who own big corporations. And so they manipulate outcomes of legal proceedings to protect them interests, and they do it under the guise of pretending it's law and legal. All right, and they try to confuse everybody about the situation, but really, and so really this is a construct of a case. If you go back to when this case was being spoken about, it was Bernie Ecclestone who was saying that Massa had a case. So why is Massa now making the case against Ecclestone? Isn't it strange that you think that there's a guy that is saying, "Oh, Massa has a case, and that case is against me." Bizarre, isn't it? So. But we'll go through this, and you'll see why. This is the barrister representing the FIA, Formula One, and Eccleston. He is a corrupt barrister. He's also a UK judge, and what he is seeking is a legal ruling that serves to protect the FIA from future challenges to historic results in Grand Prix. And that is seeking to protect the FIA, Formula One, and also the broadcasters of consequence for what they did at Abu Dhabi 2021. And I'll come to that at the end, because that was an entire fraud. This is the barrister representing Felipe Massa. I will demonstrate in this video that his entire arguments are ridiculous. This is the best British barrister representing your countryman, Felipe Massa, and it's done in such a way that it's designed to lose the case. And you'll see just how bad it is. This is the best barrister that we can provide to Felipe Massa, and I will destroy his case in this video. So you need to understand that. And this case is being overseen by what appears to be a very dubious, if not corrupt, judge. Okay, so I need to do more research on this Mr. Justice J, the so-called judge. We have in this country this facade of integrity with the costumes that they wear in these court dramas, but realistically they are just a public facade to pretend that something is all official and legal, and yet it's not going to seek justice. It's not achieving justice. But let's go through your video, and I'll explain the things which need explaining.
Australian national and resident multimillionaire files a complaint in this jurisdiction of England and Wales, based on an alleged violation of the supranational regulations of the FIA, a private international sporting organization domiciled in France, concerning events in and around the Singapore Formula One Grand Prix 17 years ago, on September 28, 2008. Mr. Massa's complaint conspicuously ignores a catalogue of his own errors or those of his team, Ferrari, during the Singapore GP and other GPs that contributed to their second place overall in the Drivers' Championship that season.
So there's another element to this as well. The FIA are guilty of, and along with Eccleston, of conspiring to cover up the fraud, which is the race fixing of Singapore 2008. And there are harmed parties that suffered loss as a result of them covering it up. But it wasn't Felipe Massa, and I'll explain that in this video.
So that's the excerpt we have highlighted here. What are the problems with this excerpt? Right off the bat, you see that they begin by saying that Massa's complaint is ambitious, convoluted, already wanting in some way to discredit this complaint, this lawsuit from Felipe. And they make a point of mentioning here that he is a multimillionaire precisely to also discredit them.
Absolutely, that shouldn't be any part of this whatsoever.
The multi-million-dollar compensation claim that Massa is making in the lawsuit, according to Massa, would be related to financial damages caused by lost prize money, sponsorships, etc., due to losing the championship. They also insist on mentioning that Massa is from Brazil. And then there's also a part that at first seems just, how can I say, standard, just formality, which is saying that the FIA is French, that the tribunal is English, etc. Speaking of an international matter.
Again, this is one of the things that they do. They argue the notion of jurisdiction. That is one of these created legal devices to absolve themselves of. It gives them a reason to kick a case out of court on that grounds to prevent justice. But this is the British justice system. They have developed that many different rules that corrupt operators of the system pick and choose to use to subvert actually justice being achieved. This is how corrupt it all is. But the reality is Formula One is registered in the UK as a UK business that they are responsible for. And therefore they have a responsibility, regardless of the fact that this is a global enterprise. These events take place worldwide, but because Formula One as a business is registered as a UK business, regardless of the nationality of the competitor, regardless of the country in which the event took place in, and regardless of the fact that the governing body that is overseeing that sport is based in another country, the Formula One being based as a UK company, the owners of essentially the product still have the liability, and so therefore it needs to be tried in the UK. So they'll still argue, the lawyers will still argue that for 3 years to decide the truth of that and have the legal debate about it, because they're all making millions out of the debate. We'll carry on with what you're saying though, and I will explain why as we get to the points that you're making. Please understand, I'm not making this video because I have any issue with the nationality of Brazil, not in any way, shape or form.
The real problem, because it's obvious that in the FIA's defense they will play dirty, they will play hardball to somehow destroy Massa, right? It's something that will look bad for one of the two sides. Make no mistake about that, okay folks? Nobody will leave this trial shaking hands.
I agree, and this is what I predict. I predict that Massa's case will be thrown out. He will be made to be humiliated, because that is what it's set up to be. So I believe it's likely that Massa is aware of that and is likely to be compensated behind the scenes for that. Obviously, I will never be able to prove that, but you'll see what I'm saying as we go through the video. But I do believe that this whole facade is set up for Massa to be humiliated and for a ruling to be created to prevent anybody else from seeking to challenge historic results in a similar manner.
One of the two will come out of this trial very tarnished and very ashamed. One of the two sides.
So everything you need is on here.
Yeah.
Orders appear
This is just one of the adverts playing on mine, so we'll carry on in a second.
here,
Yeah.
and with a click and collect.
There's Mo Farah, by the way. This is one of the greatest UK athletes, a distance runner. Used to run in events such as the 5,000 metres and 10,000 metres athletics. I'll come to an example with Mo later on in the video. I think he might have won in Rio 2016, maybe. Well, we'll come to this anyway.
For me, the problem lies in the last paragraph, when it says that Mr. Massa conspicuously ignores a catalogue of his own mistakes and those of Ferrari during Singapore and other GPs. Why is this problematic? Because we have the following.
So, I'll address that a bit later on. I'll let you speak.
Point. Formula One is going to play that card, and is playing that card, which I see some other people using, that Massa lost the championship because of his mistakes. And here's the detail. No, it wasn't because of his mistakes. While 2008 was just a season of bad luck for Massa, until Reginaldo Leme showed the world that there was a conspiracy in Singapore, that there was manipulation in Singapore, absolutely nobody was talking about Massa being champion, nobody was talking about going to court, nobody was talking about theft.
See, nobody was talking about 2008 until after 2021. What they tried to do then was delegitimize one of Lewis Hamilton's championships. So they wanted to prevent Lewis Hamilton getting to 8 and presenting that, oh, well, if there's a challenge about Abu Dhabi 2021, maybe there'll be a counter challenge for 2008. So even if he gains one, he'll lose one, to try to divert attention away from ever challenging Abu Dhabi 2021, and delegitimizing the accomplishments of Lewis Hamilton over the course of his career. But I'll let you carry on, and then I'll explain when we get to some of your points. I'll explain the actual situation that we're facing regarding 2008.
People were making fun of Glock, saying that Glock couldn't handle holding off Hamilton, all that stuff, but everyone accepted it because it's normal in sports. One day you win, another day you lose.
Glock actually got death threats after that race, and a lot of abuse, and his family received abuse from that. And again, I'll explain the implications of that later on.
Sometimes you win by a detail, you lose. It happens. Felipe Massa was champion for a few seconds there. It happens. The problem that F1 is forgetting is that with mistakes, successes, whether in Singapore or whatever, there is still a manipulated race on that calendar. There's still an Alonso who went from 10th to something, I don't remember exactly. Right now, exactly, and it went to first place with a dirty trick. At least half the grid was impacted. The camera even zoomed in on my face here.
Okay. Yes, we have a manipulated race. I'm not going to argue with that. And let me just explain that, yes, Alonso should be disqualified from that race. And they didn't disqualify him. He's still recorded as being the race winner. He's still got the trophy from that race, even though they know it was cheated. They've done nothing about it. However, I mean, you could look back at... well, let me explain it this way. In that race, Renault crashed their second driver on purpose to cause a safety car. And the FIA has to respond to the situation. And they respond to the situation by acknowledging there is a crashed car on track and we need to intervene on the grounds of safety to deal with the incident. And the way that we do that is to deploy the safety car. So that is what they do, which is standard. All teams, all competitors respond to that because that is what they know is the rules. That is what they know they have to do. As a result of the deployment of the safety car, all teams, all competitors are impacted. All of the previously built up advantages between all of the competitors get wiped out. That happens every time a safety car is deployed. Safety cars can be deployed if there is a crash, whether it was manufactured or not, but if there's a crash, they deploy a safety car. If, for example, in 2015, I believe it was, might have been 2016, there was a spectator who walked down the track at Singapore. Again, it's a safety concern, so they deployed the safety car. All of the advantages that had been built up between all of the competitors in that race, they all got wiped out due to that event being compromised due to an artificial event. A piece of debris can fall off a car. They can choose to either deal with it under double wave yellows, whereby people are just encouraged to slow down. They can choose to deal with it with virtual safety car, where the gaps are maintained, or they can choose to deal with it with a safety car where all of the gaps are lost. So manipulation within races is not new. All of the advantages that had been built up get wiped out, and then because of the safety car situation, teams use that opportunity to get a less time pit stop, a cheaper pit stop where they lose less race time in those conditions effectively. Many teams chose to pit their drivers. Many teams got their driver into the pit, changed tyres, refueled, got back out onto that racetrack, and were still able to contest for position in that race and contest for World Championship points. Felipe Massa was not denied by the FIA from being able to do that. What denied Felipe Massa of the opportunity to contest in that race, once that situation had taken place, was the failure of the Ferrari team, releasing Felipe Massa with the fuel rig still attached to his car. So Massa drove off down the pit lane, dragging that fuel rig, had to stop at the end of the pit lane, and then his mechanics came running after him, spent a lot of time then trying to pull the fueling rig off of his car. And by the time Felipe Massa then was able to get back to the racetrack, He had lost many places. And then because of that unsafe release, Felipe Massa was then given a further penalty by the FIA, which is standard for the infringement of an unsafe release. So in terms of how the FIA, the governing body of the sport, dealt with what they saw at that time, the FIA didn't do anything wrong. They did everything that was appropriate. What cost Massa the opportunity to compete in that race was the failure of Ferrari. When he then continued driving in that race, it appeared that psychologically Felipe Massa didn't get the best out of himself. He seemed to psychologically not deal with it well, therefore didn't drive well for the remainder of the race. He spun his car, and despite being in a Ferrari that was one of the fastest cars on the grid at that time, wasn't able to carve his way through the back markers in that field to gain positions to make it into the points. So, whilst I accept that the crash was an artificial crash, what you cannot do is void a race, just cancel a race due to some form of cheating. Okay, some sort of event taking place in a race that they deal with in the correct manner, because essentially what you have to deal with it as is they created a safety concern. So whether that safety concern happens in a manufactured way or in an organic way, the governing body has got a protocol to deal with it. Now, you wouldn't think that they would be making a safety concern in a manufactured way. That's defrauding everybody. But ultimately, the protocols that are there deal with the situation of our responsibility as the FIA is to oversee this event in accordance with the rules and regulations of the sport and to ensure that it is carried out in a safe manner. And they did that. Those protocols were carried out. All teams, all drivers responded to those protocols. The only one that was really affected in that way was Felipe Massa, and that was due to the errors of the Ferrari team. Had the error not have taken place, Massa would have returned to the track, would have been in a position to compete with the competitors in and around him. Yes, Alonso gained positions in that race and was declared the winner. Massa had it were it not for the botched pit stop, may still have challenged and beaten Alonso. That may have happened. We will never know because it didn't happen. But ultimately, how you deal with that is not to cancel a race, it's to disqualify the cheat and then reallocate the finishing positions. I'm going to carry on and let you talk, and we'll go through a little bit more as we go through.
Half the grid was impacted by Renault's manipulation.
As I've just described, they all were. Every competitor in that race was impacted by it. They were all subjected to that safety car. All competitors were made to bunch up, but this is what happens in every situation, in every Grand Prix where there's a safety concern and they deploy the safety car. That's what happens. All the advantage that you'd built up over everybody else, well, that gets wiped out, and you also get the opportunity to gain any time that you were behind anybody that you were behind. So that impacted everybody, but many things impact everybody. Okay?
There is indeed a direct impact. That pit stop by Massa, in particular, is a stop that in itself is already an impact because it goes against the team's initial plan.
Indeed, it is. But this is what they do. In every single Grand Prix, a team might have a strategy whereby it's a 70-lap race. They plan to do the first 30 laps of it on one compound of tyre and the remaining 40 on another. But if there's a safety car deployed at lap 25, they'll use that opportunity and maybe pit and change their tyres at lap 25. They won't say, oh no, we'll leave it until lap 30 because that's our plan. That's how they react to these things.
If it's a crash that generates a normal safety car, as we all thought until the moment it was revealed to the world, everything is fine, no problem at all. It happened.
Okay, and like I say, I agree in as much that cheating and what Renault did is disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. But ultimately, what is taking place? What is taking place is there is a race taking place and a car has crashed. And this is what was known at the time, unless Bernie Ecclestone was in on the fix. And it's not beyond the realm of possibility that Bernie Ecclestone cut a deal with, for example, ING Bank for them to sponsor that event. They also sponsor the Renault car, which got the publicity of winning that race. And the kind of individual that Ecclestone appears to be is that he will cut deals with people to sponsor his show and maybe promise them something good in return. And who knows the actual situation regarding that, whether Ecclestone would have known ahead of this situation whether that was going to take place. He'll deny it, of course. I mean, Bernie, he won't be able to remember because he's 95 now and he can't even remember telling the interview back in 2003 that he became aware of this at the Brazilian Grand Prix of 2008, the last race of the season. Bernie's forgotten that, so he'll have forgotten, obviously, whether he made a deal with ING Bank back then. So, you know, we can't trust Bernie's account of the situation anyway, because clearly, if he can't remember what took place back in 2023, there's no chance of him remember what discussions or deals that he may have done in 2008. And there's obviously not going to be any records of such deals. They're going to be conversations between billionaires. So, what I'm saying back to this race is that the governing body, at the time it was Charlie Whiting who was the race director, would have seen that there's a Formula One race taking place, there is a crash, we deal with the crash by deploying the safety car, we carry out the safety car protocols, all the teams are aware of the protocols, the teams react to that safety car situation. Some teams will choose to pit their car, refuel, change tyres, and then we carry on racing. And that's what they did. And that's what would have happened for Massa were it not for Ferrari releasing him with that rig still attached. That's the simplicity of it. Were it not for that rig still being attached, we wouldn't be having this conversation because Massa would have been released back into the race. So and then the situation is if that situation is the same situation for all competitors, you've not compromised sporting fairness to all those competitors. The gaps get wiped out for all competitors. All competitors can have the opportunity to pit and change tyres and refuel. It's possible for them all. The flaw that season was that they had a rule whereby the pit lane was closed initially when the safety car was deployed, and if it was your strategy that you were planning on refueling at that time and therefore you were running out of fuel and had to pit to avoid running out of fuel, then you actually got a penalty for pitting under the safety car in the first lap or two of the safety car deployment. But they amended that rule. They realised that that was an error. How they didn't realise that problem before implementing that rule, who knows? But that's obviously for a different issue altogether. But this is how you need to be understanding the actual dynamics of the situation. And it's not that I want to be against Felipe Massa. It's just a clear way of how you need to be able to deal with such circumstances. And the manner in which the FIA dealt with it was in exactly the same manner that they would deal with any situation like that, organically generated or not. Somebody walking onto a track is not an organic situation you'd expect in a motor race. Likewise is a second team, for example, knowing that they've got a problem with their car, like, for example, the Red Bull B team, knowing that they've got a problem with one of their cars and sending that car back onto the track so that it retires from the race whilst on the track, causing the deployment of a safety car. We can all think of races where that may have taken place in somebody's home nation, but we'll again, that's for other times. Let's carry on with your video.
There was a problem with the hose, it happens. Now, from the moment a manipulated move causes a driver to gain several positions and as a result of that move you have a series of events, yes, that race was manipulated and shouldn't be on the calendar.
Okay, the race was manipulated by Renault, elevating Alonso to first position. So they gained through cheating, so you disqualify the cheats and you impose a penalty on Renault. You disqualify Renault from the Constructors' Championship for breaching the FIA International Sporting Code and cheating. Absolutely. And Alonso definitely gets disqualified from the race. Alonso will claim that he wasn't aware of the plan, and further investigation of that would be required because you cannot trust an FIA investigation. But if he wasn't aware, then maybe just the disqualification from that race for Alonso would be sufficient. But what you do not do is to cancel the race. And the reason that you do not have that as a rule within sport is that if you cancelled an event due to cheating, then it is open to manipulation. Let's say we go into the last race of the season and you as a driver are leading the championship and your main rival is 5 points behind you in the championship. In that final race, your main rival is leading the race. You are in second position, so they're going to pick up 25 points. You're going to only pick up 18 points. They are on course to win. There is no chance of you overcoming them. So what do? You cheat, or you get your teammate to cheat, or you get somebody in your B team to cheat, or you get somebody who you supply engines to cheat. It becomes known that somebody cheated in that event, manipulated that event somehow, and so the event gets cancelled. Now what? You've caused something to get cancelled that has meant that you have maintained your position in the championship. You are in the lead, you are going to get beaten in that event, so rather than get beaten, you cheat to make that event voided. That's how it can be open to manipulation. So you cannot void an event. All you do is you disqualify the cheats. Okay? Otherwise, like I say, it can manipulate championships by people just saying, well, I'm not doing very well in this race. My main rival is doing very well. So let's get this event voided. We'll cheat. That cancels the entire outcome of this race. That means that I don't suffer losing ground to my main competitor in this event. You just categorically cannot have that in sport. It would be open to manipulation.
Just the fact that it was manipulated should be more than enough to remove it from the calendar.
I've just answered that question.
That fact alone. But you also have the aggravating factor of directly influencing the World Championship. My problem here is that the FIA is acting as if Singapore were a normal race, as if Singapore had nothing wrong with it. And Berniston's statements, which are the same statements that led Massa to take legal action claiming they knew before the season ended, are extremely serious.
Agreed. Okay, some of your points, I'm not arguing with your points, and I understand your outrage. However, in terms of the race at Singapore, essentially, it was a Formula One Grand Prix. A car crashed. They deployed the safety car. During that safety car period, one of the cars, its team didn't release the car with the rig attached. That then cost that driver a lot of time. And because of the unsafe release, that driver got a penalty, which is what would be normal. And then because the driver was very frustrated at that whole situation, they didn't then drive well for the remainder of the race and never finished in the points. That is the bare bones. With removing emotion, because this is what we have to do. We have to remove emotion and desire from what it is we're looking at and who we want to win, and we have to completely remove that. We just have to look at the facts of the situation. That is the facts of the situation. We then find out that that crash was manufactured. which is disgusting. However, and as a result of that being manufactured, somebody had ran a strategy to purposely benefit from the manufactured crash, which is cheating. So we disqualify those cheats. But if no other drivers knew, if the governing body didn't know, then essentially the way that that race was carried out was just like any other organic Formula One race, whereby a race can be happening, a crash can take place, they deploy the safety car, all teams respond to that safety car situation, all teams go back onto track, the race continues. They still are racing each other, they still got the opportunity to compete for position, and they still then earn World Championship points as a result of that race. If during those pit stops that they choose to take during that safety car pit situation, one of those teams makes an error, for example, cross threads a wheel nut and their pit stop takes too long and they lose places due to the pit stop. For example, I think it's an Australian Grand Prix whereby one of the wheel nuts wasn't tightened on correctly, and as the car drove off down the pit lane, the wheel came off the car. Okay, that sort of thing, that's the error of the team. It's not the error of the FIA. It's not affecting the sporting process. The FIA's responsibility, though, once they understand that cheating is taking place, is to deal with the cheats and then reallocate the points in that race to those competitors.
Extremely serious, terrible. Formula One deliberately allowed a championship to be decided through manipulation.
Let me just come to a different point here. I'm hoping have I got the right tab? Is it this one? This is the championship standings for that season, and Lewis Hamilton's at the top, 98 points. Felipe Massa, 97 points, and this is their results over the course of the season. Now, each of those races contributed to this points total, and you can go through. Hamilton got no points there, retired there, no points there, no points here. Massa's got retirement, no points there, no points there, no points there. All of these things impact. Here in Belgium, Hamilton is listed as third position, and I'll put a link into this video, and that takes you through how the FIA penalised Hamilton at Belgium. Extremely dodgy. And so the decisions of the FIA do influence outcomes of races. I don't need to go any further with that. I'll put the link to this video for people to see how the FIA penalised Lewis Hamilton at the Belgian Grand Prix of 2008 and see how that impacted him, because he did cross the line first at Belgium and got relegated to third. So rather than pick up 10 points there, only got 6. These things do affect the season-long totals. Okay? And let me just, like I said, there's a lot more that I need to explain to you so you've got a full picture of why this case is even taking place, and understanding when I demonstrate the barrister's argument that he is presenting the opposite of the truth.
Done. And that's why, because you directly impacted other teams and other drivers, because Formula One isn't athletics or swimming, where everyone is in their own lane, so what you do only influences you. Formula One influences everyone else.
Okay, so the example you're giving when it comes to cheating in sport, and the example we often use in sport, is if there is somebody taking performance-enhancing drugs, they then get disqualified. That is the standard that we see. So, for example, men's 100-metre sprint, back in 1988, the Seoul Olympics, Ben Johnson crossed the line first, failed the drug test, and was stripped of the gold medal, and those medals reallocated. Okay, clear example. And that's, as you described, a competition where they are competing in a lane, not influencing anybody else's performance. But, as I spoke about Mo Farah earlier in the video, our 5,000, 10,000 metre runner, distance events aren't competed in lanes. You are potentially jostling, running alongside your fellow competitor, and pacing yourself relative to your fellow competitor. Because it's not a time trial, it's not a case of run it as fast as you can. There's strategy involved. Okay, you are pacing yourself relative to those around you. And if one goes off at a super quick pace that you feel you need to stay with, and that makes you burn out of energy early, and then you fail later on in that race because you've gone off too quickly, and it turns out the person that went off too quickly failed a drug test, and you've responded to their race strategy because you felt you needed to, you've had your race destroyed by a drug cheat, and you still don't void the race. Okay, that's the way it is. You know, sport is a dynamic process, and it doesn't, what goes on in a sporting event is multifaceted. You can easily pick out the different things which affect performance. But what you have to do, you have to have a set of parameters and a set of protocols of dealing with situations. And they did, at the Singapore Grand Prix, deal with the situation according to their protocols. What they didn't do in accordance with the protocol is at the end of the season when they found out and covered it up. And again, I'll get to that.
That's why it's not enough to simply disqualify Alonso and Renault from the race, because you influence the dynamics of the race, you influence the strategies, you influence the...
Happens at every race. Every race where there is an intervention in that race due to a safety concern, obviously primarily with the safety car deployment, that impacts the race. You could have been in the lead of that race by 20 seconds, something happens, and your 20-second lead is wiped out. That's the way that they operate this sport. I'm not saying it's right. There are other alternatives to that, but this is the rules and regulations of the sport. All competitors compete under those rules. They know the rules, they know the protocols, and the spectators are aware of what the rules are. We're all lied to about the actual rules and the implications of the rules, but we are familiar with what we see and accept it for what it is. And I'll come to how we're lied to about this later on. So again, Singapore, the fundamentals, other than it being a manufactured crash, is exactly the same dynamics that you will see for a similar situation, if it was organic, at any other race. It was clearly the only thing that impacted Massa's race wasn't the crash, because it didn't impact everybody else's race who secured points in that race. Okay, it wasn't the crash that impacted their race. It did relative to Alonso, and that's why you disqualify Alonso. But relative to each other, it didn't impact their race. The only reason that Massa was impacted differently was because of the Ferrari error.
Normal planning of the race, the normal course of events with something manipulated. You can't consider Singapore 2008 normal, Mateus, just because it's a Brazilian. Is it just because it's a Brazilian, people?
Not in any way, shape or form. In actual fact, I am a big fan of the Brazilian. In fact, the only Brazilian I don't like is Oscar. Okay, Oscar, that prick, cost me about 200 quid. I had him in my fantasy team. It's the semi-final of the World Cup a few years ago when Brazil drilled Germany about 7-1. And I think you're about 6 or 7-0 up. I'd got Oscar in my fantasy team. I'd flooded my fantasy team with Brazilians. The Brazilian goalkeeper, I think I've got 4 or 5 Brazilian defenders in my lineup. I'd got Oscar in there. And Oscar went through one-on-one, was about to score, and the prick missed the one-on-one chance. Germany broke, went up the other end and scored. Okay, so not only did I lose out on points by Oscar not finishing that easy opportunity, it cost me clean sheet points for the goalkeeper and all the Brazilian defenders. And also the midfielders, you get an extra point for the midfield for the clean sheet as well. And that ultimately cost me winning the fantasy football competition. So yes, Oscar, he's a prick. But other than that, I've got no issue with any Brazilian whatsoever.
Can't people reason that we're talking about a manipulated race? You can't consider a manipulated race normal. If people are going to take this too seriously, it's all about club rivalry, it's because it's Brazilian,
Have I sped that up?
it's because it's Hamilton, it's because it's Verstappen, it's because it's Leclerc, it's because it's Schumacher. If everything is about club rivalry, then it's no longer about right and wrong, it's simply about my favorite driver winning.
Unfortunately, that's the dynamic, and this is a dynamic that we've seen more of late. Okay, the show of Formula One has purposefully sought to incite people to get this idea of tribal rivalry. They want to make it more like a partisan kind of football crowd. This is why we now see the Orange Army and the division within the sport that didn't used to be anywhere near the same as what it is now. But they want people to fight each other. That increases engagement for them, and they make money out of it. It's all done by design. This is done to divide us. What I'm trying to do with this video is just to demonstrate the true mechanics of what was going on here. I'm not trying to do this to discredit Felipe Massa. I'm not trying to do this as an anti-Brazil thing. I'm just trying to inform you of the corruption, demonstrate that if you remove emotion and just look at the facts of the situation, that it was the error by Ferrari that actually cost Massa scoring points in that race, because although Renault cheated and need to be disqualified, had Ferrari not made the error, Massa would have been released back into that running order in a position where he was still in a position to compete. We don't know how that would have played out. He might have gone on to win it. He might have tangled with somebody and crashed out. We don't know. It didn't happen. But were it not for the error, he'd have still been able to compete with those cars around him and potentially able to pick up points. And it didn't happen because of the error. And that's how you need to look at it. Okay, I'm not saying it's right in terms of what happened is not right, and there needs to be consequence for that. But you also have to acknowledge that in every given race of Formula One, if that race is compromised due to a safety concern, they deal with it, they utilise the safety car, it ruins the race, it neutralises racing, it wipes out all previously built up advantages, and then you get the restart condition reset, and you start off again. And you can't say, oh, well, I was winning that race by 20 seconds, that got wiped out, I then lost the race, so we need to cancel the race. Nobody does that, because everybody's signed up to the protocols of the rules and regulations of the sport. We accept that that's how they do it.
And I personally can't have that mentality. As I've told you countless times, I'm a fan of the sport, and the sport, above any driver, any team. Cannot consider what happened in Singapore normal. Massa's case cannot be considered normal. If it's handled in a minimally coherent way, the court cannot judge what happened in Singapore as normal.
No, it's not normal, but the manner in which you have to address the situation is as I've described it. You have to drill down to the bare facts of the situation. So what took place at Formula One Grand Prix? From the FIA's perspective, what did they have presented to them? What were they dealing with? During that race, an incident occurred, which was a car crashing. This is what we see in Formula One races. We occasionally see cars crash. How does that governing body respond to that? Well, they respond to that by deploying the safety car. That's what they did. How did the teams respond to that? The teams responded to that by electing to use that opportunity to pit their drivers, which is what many of them did. What did we then see? We saw the error by Ferrari costing Massa places. We then see the FIA punish that error in the way that they would punish that error because of the infringement of it being an unsafe release. So if the crash was organic, were it not done on purpose, that is the outcome of that race. Because and there would be no concern whatsoever about it. The only concern is it was done artificially, and somebody benefited from that artificial doing of that, and so you disqualify them. And what you also do is you impose a significant consequence on those people who did that. But you can't then take that event out of the calendar, because, as I've explained, it sets a precedent of saying that then opens everything up to manipulation. Okay.
There's a direct impact on the World Drivers' Championship, but we know that judgments aren't about the truth, but about who has the best arguments.
Sadly, yes, I agree with your last statement. Judgments aren't about the truth. It's about who acts the best, who gives the best performance in the facade that's overseen by these people in costumes. You know, it is this illusion of integrity where you sit in this theatre overseen by somebody wearing a costume with the with a projection of how intelligent they are by the number of books behind them, and how they speak and how they project themselves and the words that they use to basically try to confuse you. And these people pretend that they have got intricate legal arguments, and it's not achieved. It doesn't achieve justice. It is achieving an outcome that is a contrived outcome, manipulated to benefit those with wealth, because that is what our corrupt system does. But what I'm seeking to do is to demonstrate to you what the actual crux of the case is. Now, I've spoken about what took place in Singapore. We then get to the final race of the season, which is Brazil. Now, what is reported is that Eccleston and the head of the FIA, Max Mosley at the time, were made aware that this cheating at Singapore had taken place at that Brazilian Grand Prix. And rather than take the action that they were required to take, and that action is to disqualify Fernando Alonso from that race in Singapore and disqualify Renault from the entire championship for cheating, they tried to cover it up. They wanted to cover it up so the world didn't get to find out of the corruption in Formula One. They did that for the primary reason of protecting the financial interests of Formula One. Bernie Ecclestone is a billionaire. He sold a great share of his business to an investment firm based in Luxembourg in 2005, and he remained on as the CEO. So he was still responsible for the monetary value of the business of Formula One. And he knew that the scandal being exposed would plummet the value of Formula One. The value of Formula One is linked to the amount of investment that it has. The number of other companies that want to utilize Formula One pay money to Formula One for its global advertising, because Formula One is used as a global marketing roadshow for a lot of brands. So they pay their money to the show of Formula One, and they get the exposure of having their brand being associated with this prestigious sport that people aspire to being involved in and aspiring to that lifestyle. And that is very valuable to them. But if that sport is compromised, if that sport is perceived as being just corrupt and cheating, companies do not want to associate with that. That devalues the business. So Ecclestone's motive primarily was to ensure that that information was never revealed, because it would have compromised the value of Formula One. And he ensured that the governing body didn't take the correct action of disqualifying Alonso from Singapore, and didn't disqualify Renault from the Constructors' Championship. And that is out and out corruption. And here's the situation. Had they have disqualified Fernando Alonso from that race, what would it have done would have taken his 10 points that he received in Singapore. He would have lost them, taking him down to 51 points in that Drivers' Championship. Before Singapore, he'd have been below that because that was his finishing position, having finished second in Brazil. So, but overall, his points for the season would have been down at 51. That would have dropped him 2 positions in that championship. That means Kovalainen and Heidfeld should have been ahead of him in that championship. They might have been on a bonus for their contracts where they got more money from their employer due to finishing higher in that championship. And that then affects their future employment opportunities, their future contract negotiations, their future image rights negotiations, all of these things that these 2 drivers that now finished below Alonso in that championship, they missed out on them. Nico Rosberg missed out on a race victory. This is something I've not mentioned. Again, where has Nico Rosberg finished here? His highest points position that season was second in Singapore. He should have had a race win that season. I might look at that. Would that have been his first race win? Did you rob Nico Rosberg of his maiden race victory? And if you did, what impact did then that have on Rosberg's entire F1 career? His marketing image, the age he was when he won that race. What impact did they have on Rosberg? I've not spoken about that bit before. This is what I say. The more you look at a situation, the more that new things about it pop out at you. So, what we would have also known before this race, if you'd have reallocated the points from Singapore, is that, and what we do, we take the points off of here. So we know that Felipe Massa won the final race in Brazil, earning 10 points. So going into the race, he only had 87 points. Lewis Hamilton finished 5th and picked up 4 points. So Lewis Hamilton was on 94 points. So going into that race, Hamilton on 94, Massa on 87. That's a difference of 7 points. When you reallocate Singapore after disqualifying Alonso, Hamilton gets elevated to 2nd position. So rather than just 6 points there, he actually gets 8 points for finishing 2nd, taking him to 96 points. Prior to Brazil, 86 points in the championship. Massa gets elevated from 13th to 12th in that race, but still not in the points. So, going into the Brazilian race, it is known to the world that Massa is on 87 points, Hamilton is on 96 points, a lead of 9 points, and so that it is known to everybody that Hamilton has to secure a minimum of 2 points in order to be crowned champion. So everybody knows going into the race that Massa has to win and hope that Hamilton finishes lower than 7th, because finishing 8th, Massa wins the title. They'd be even on points, but Massa will have won more races than Hamilton over the season, so Massa is declared champion. So Hamilton would have had to have finished 7th to get 2 points to win the championship by a point. Everybody would have been aware of that. By not telling everybody, by covering it up, it meant that rather than just have to achieve 2 points in that final race, it made it more difficult for Hamilton, making him have to achieve 4 points. It also made it more exciting, made the battle tighter, didn't it? Made the points difference tighter. So that, again, benefits the show of Formula One. They'd have also known that when Massa was crossing the line, and although Massa had done his job there, done what he needed to do, they'd have been aware that at the moment Massa crossed the line, Hamilton was in 6th position, which was enough. He had got 3 points. He was on course for 3 points at that point in time, which would have been enough. So there would have been less drama. They wouldn't have taken the TV cameras to Massa's father, Massa's brother in the pits, who were beginning to celebrate because they thought that his son, his brother, was on course to become a world champion, only to have that then dashed when Hamilton performs his overtake on Glock, which should have been insignificant. Which then, as a result of that, what should have been insignificant overtake resulted in Glock getting death threats from people, thinking that he'd allowed him to do it on purpose. Now, I'm not going to argue with you whether that was the case or not. I do not know. Okay, none of us do. Only those people involved in this corrupt show know exactly what they're doing. I don't know. But they're the dynamics of the situation in terms of you have to view it from that perspective. And on from that, when we then come down to the Constructors' Championship, when you remove Renault from this, you can either, and again, this is just something that's just come to me now. You can, there's two ways of looking at it. The way I just thought of it one way, and then I've gone back on myself, and I'll explain why. I've been saying that you need to remove Renault from the championship, and what that does, that elevates each of these teams a position higher in this championship. Each of those teams then receives extra prize money, likely to be an extra £10 million, maybe $10 million each for each of these teams. Each one moves up a position. Each team gets an extra $10 million or £10 million, for example. Each of the employees for those teams is likely to get a bonus each year that is linked, directly related to how much money their team gets for finishing their position in that championship. In addition to that, the prize money that Renault, if they'd have been valid, let's say this team, we'll ignore Super Guria Honda, but this team, Force India, would have been on course for, say, the lowest prize pot, which is, say, 10 million. But with them being moved up and Renault being down here, you don't give Renault anything. That final prize pot of, say, 10 million, you would distribute that between the other 9 teams. So every team, even these 3 teams at the top, would get a share of the final prize pot. And that would be an increased amount of money for each of these teams, which then would get distributed between their team members, their team staff, as an extra bonus. So everybody from all of these teams has lost out due to how Renault defrauded everybody. This is what the FIA have actually covered up. And this is what they don't want the world to actually know. The idea that I had was, if you disqualify Renault, then maybe you need to go back across the entire season, and all of these points received by both of these drivers, every result of every race needs to be recalculated with different finishing positions for all of those drivers when you remove Alonso and Piquet Jr. from each of those results of each of those races. However, should we do that or should we not? It's a difficult one. There's an argument to say it's not the driver's fault. They felt that they were competing in an organic manner and that aren't the ones to be punished. So they felt that you only punish them in the events that they were known to be cheating, but you make an example of the team for what it has done, which is a criminal offence. It's a global fraud. Manipulating a sporting event is an act of fraud. It's a criminal offence, and that is how you punish a criminal. The drivers, if they are innocent parties in that, believing they're competing in an authentic manner, you shouldn't necessarily punish them in the same way. It opens a whole can of worms, doesn't it, if you then start saying we're going to rechange all of the results from all of the races that season. But that is a perspective way of looking at it. But again, that's just something that just came to me as I was talking about this. Now, what we have is Nick DeMarco, the barrister for Massa. He is constructing a case saying that the manner in which the FIA dealt with this, it should be that they should have cancelled the race and made Massa champion that season, and now they want Massa to be known as the champion, and they believe that he should be worth 64 million pounds, which is about $80 million US dollars, in compensation. As I've demonstrated, the action to take is not to cancel the Singapore Grand Prix. It's to disqualify Alonso, to expel Renault from that season's championship, and reallocate the points and redistribute the prize fund and compensate all who are impacted. And those that were impacted were Timo Glock, received death threats when he shouldn't have had to be put in that position. His family should not have received the abuse that they did. He was put in that position due to the world being misinformed by the FIA cover-up. The creation of tighter drama, meaning that Hamilton had to secure at least 4 points that race in order to be world champion, as opposed to only having to secure 2 points that race in order to secure the world championship. Hamilton is now being undermined as a driver. His reputation is being undermined by casting doubt over the validity of his accomplishment in 2008. This is what this barrister is doing by presenting this corrupt argument. And any judge who analyses the situation in the manner in which I am, which hopefully is clear for everybody to see, and I might improve upon this as I go through, as it continually evolves. Any judge needs to look at it in that light. The reason that Massa did not pick up points in Singapore is not due to the manufactured crash, because other teams and other drivers picked up points there. It is due to the Ferrari error. So you do not void the race, meaning it did not impact Massa's championship. It didn't impact the number of points that Massa accumulated that season. That was impacted by Ferrari's mistake. Because were it not for the mistake, Massa's opportunity to secure points would have still been there in the same manner it was there for everybody else. And that hopefully has clarified that situation. This barrister is not presenting that. And this is a man who is presented to the world as being an expert of sport law. That's the situation. In return, this man is a UK judge, supposed to be overseeing justice. He is representing the FIA, which are a corrupt governing body of the sport, and he is seeking an outcome here where they quash Massa, they make Massa look a fool, and as a result of that, seek a ruling in law which will say, we will now have a legal ruling whereby cases against the FIA which seek to change historic results are now no longer, because it will bring the sport into disrepute and they are spurious cases, and we will they will ground it on this principle of finality, which is a cornerstone of law, which is what they want to then do. So this British judge, now acting as a barrister for a corrupt organisation, is seeking the imposition of a new law to protect a corrupt organisation. Hopefully that has made you understand just how corrupt our British justice system is. But they will present themselves as, oh, they all have integrity. And you can read about Mr. Justice J and you can see just how much integrity he's got. This is the corrupt facade that we live in. I'll finish off your video and then I'm going to just explain something to you about Abu Dhabi. Because what I'm hoping that you will be willing to do, and I'm addressing you, the man that's on the screen at the moment. I respect very much the fact that you've got a platform and you've got a subscriber count of 313,000 subscribers that you can inform. You've produced this video, and it's been seen by 93,000 people, and it's had 8,500 positive reactions. And I'm hoping that you can produce a video to demonstrate to the Brazilian following that you have and the South American following that you might have. I'm guessing it's mainly Portuguese speaking that you have. But I'm hoping that you can produce something similar to this to explain these dynamics to the people that listen to you. And I'm then subsequently hoping that the other video that I'm going to show you, you're able to produce a similar video to explain the dynamics of Abu Dhabi 2021 to those people. But also compare the Portuguese language commentary and see if exactly the same things are being done to you that were done to us. Because in this sport, the media is lying to us about what is taking place. So I'm going to show you what they did to us, and I believe that they will have done it to you. And I'm going to show you that well, I'll finish what you were saying in this video, and then I'll show you what my point is regarding Abu Dhabi 2021. And I hope that you can then expose that to the people of Brazil.
So, I hope Mass's defense does a good job, makes a good plan on how to use the information in this case.
Sadly, our English barrister is making a case designed for Massa to lose. And I'm sorry for that. I'm an Englishman, and I'm embarrassed at just how corrupt we are. I'm trying to stand for justice. I'm trying to stand for doing the right thing. But this is the system that we work in. We don't work in, we live in, that we have to live under, that I'm trying to challenge. We're not all as bad as some of these people.
Because we simply cannot consider what happened there in 2008 normal.
I agree. And we need to make an example of the cheats. We need to give them proper consequences. Flavio Briatore was supposed to be banned for life. He's still back working in Formula One with the Alpine team now. Pat Symonds, who was also part of that cheat, part of creating the plan to crash Piquet Jr., he then got a job as the technical director within the FIA. Bernie Ecclestone is guilty of tax fraud in the UK. He was able to pay money to keep himself out of prison. This is how corrupt everything is.
My solution, what I think is right and fair, as I've said countless times here on the channel, is that Lewis Hamilton and McLaren didn't participate. They have nothing to do with manipulation. You keep both world champions. But the footnote, the asterisk, in 2008, you also have the champion in 17 cleanly contested races, which is Felipe Massa, deservedly recognized as champion. Formula One has
the FIA do manipulate, and I would invite you to go and watch this video here about what they did at Spa that season. We could go into every race. What we're seeing all the time now, in 2021 and ever since, you look at the stewarding decisions, the penalties that they impose, which drivers get penalties for doing what, which drivers drive other cars off the track, and no action is taken. This is entirely manipulated by the FIA, a governing body of the sport who are not fit for purpose. They manufacture outcomes in this entire show of a thing. And just to let you know, in the UK, we do have reporting systems. I have reported these barristers for what they're doing, which is criminal. I am going to report the second barrister representing the FIA to what we call the Judicial Conduct Investigations Office. A lot of these regulatory bodies supposed to hold these perpetrators to account don't do so, but I am doing this. What I'm going to do now is just show you something briefly about Abu Dhabi 2021 and just show you how things are lied to about. So this is just before Nicholas Latifi crashes. This is the blue dot of Nicholas Latifi at turn 11. And we're on Lewis Hamilton, the leader there, is on his lap 53. Behind him is Lando Norris. Remember, a couple of laps earlier, Lando Norris had to go into the pits because of a pretend slow puncture and re-emerged. At the time before he went into the pits, he was on course to finish in that race where he'd have ended up fifth in the Drivers' Championship. But they pitted him in and around the time where Christian Horner was on the radio asking for some help from the racing gods. And then we get the distraction of Norris having to pit. And then we get told, is there another tyre twist in this Grand Prix? Disorientation all the time. Anyway, here's Norris currently running in 8th position. They've retired Perez in that safety car window, and that guaranteed Mercedes the Constructors' Championship prize. But so ultimately, Norris in 8th and Gasly in 7th will become Gasly in 6th and Norris in 7th. But look at their relative positions when Nicholas Latifi crashes.
At their detriment at the start of this season, it's once again a great recovery because they felt they've been hampered coming into this season by those slight regulation changes.
Wow, that feels like a long time ago, doesn't it?
Nicholas Latifi has crashed there. Here is Lewis Hamilton, the leader. Here is 8th place Norris. Here is 7th place Gasly. The time difference.
He's had an
So here, Norris is 11 seconds behind Gasly. Okay, just 11 seconds on the road behind Gasly. Max Verstappen is nearly 12 seconds behind Hamilton. Safety car, all of these advantages between all competitors get wiped out. They have to this is how a safety car is. If a race has to be impeded, it has to be what's the word I'm looking for? Interjected. It has to be neutralised. Was the word I'm looking for. Due to having to deal with a safety concern. And by the way, Nicholas Latifi, at the start of that lap, his radio message was, "It has to be this lap, Nicholas." And then he went around turn 14. We had this pretend fight with Mick Schumacher to make his tyres dirty. And then he went around turn 14 in 3rd gear and floored the accelerator. The previous 5 laps, at least, he'd gone around turn 14 in 4th gear. So hopefully everybody in Brazil knows how to drive a manual car. You drop a gear and floor the accelerator. What happens in a rear-wheel drive car? You'd think a professional driver would know what happened. Anyway, but that would be a conspiracy to think that he crashed on purpose. Anyway, what happened is, we'll go back to track of you. Knowing that Norris is only 11 seconds on the road behind Gasly, we know that as a result of that, we know that Gasly now disappears off around the track and ultimately catches the safety car. Norris has to wait behind Hamilton. So we've just moved this on here. And what do we get? No, they've released them there. That's too much. This is what we end up with. This is the line of cars. Hamilton, Norris, and now Gasly's all here. There is a mandatory requirement for the cars that have been lapped, all 8 of them, to be released past the leader and be given the opportunity to make it all the way around the track, to catch up with this snake of cars, to ensure that we now have the restart condition, which is a line of cars in the correct race order, one behind the other, and so that all of the advantages that have been wiped out between all the competitors have been applied uniformly across that field. That's a mandatory requirement in the regulations. That's what the regulations actually mean. During that safety car period, our presented expert of the sport, Martin Brundle, was telling us, will they perform this regulation? He doesn't think it's mandatory, but that's normally when it's raining. And if they do perform the regulation, how long will they wait before they restart racing? And then he pretends it's a surprise that they start racing again. And immediately when it's announced that the safety car is ending, the TV company play us a message from Toto Wolff that they already had prepared to play us. Every message that they play us, from the team to the driver to Max Verstappen, is to make the people that are watching feel that things are being done to disadvantage Max Verstappen. Their messages are messages that they have chosen to pick out, that they've edited down, which I prove, and then they choose to play them to the world to make us feel that. We are on lap 57 when we get the message to say from Christian Horner to Michael Massey, we only need one lap. At that stage, it is impossible to have one lap. It is mandatory, it's a safety car finish by that lap. The TV company selecting to play us that message know the rules and regulations of the sport because they produce the footage at every Grand Prix. They know how this works. And yet they chose to play that message to guide us to think about it a certain way. So I will be interested to hopefully get a response from you where you can get the Portuguese language commentary of this, and hopefully you can give a response video to me that I can show my subscribers as to how the people of Brazil were presented with Abu Dhabi 2021. I hope that we can help each other in this regard, but I will make another video detailing what was actually said to us and breaking down what must happen, what was happening on track at that stage, and the techniques that they are using to disorientate us, the fans of the sport. They defrauded every single one of us. Anyway, to my subscribers, the people that are subscribed to my channel, what I hope you can do is go and show this channel some support, Razaka Motor, and if you can leave a comment to try to, because obviously a lot of comments, they do either get ignored or they get bypassed, but if there's lots of comments on this channel all saying please watch this video, hopefully this content creator will go, okay, I need to see this video, and he will. Okay, and hopefully he can inform the people of Brazil who probably don't get so much access to the English speaking content, or certainly we know this channel doesn't have that much of a reach. Hopefully he can at least see what's being said. Okay, thank you all for your time, and until the next time, see you in a bit.